Good afternoon and welcome to Building AI Literacy Across the Health System Workforce, a Health System CIO production. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. My name is Anthony Guerra. I'm the founder and editor of Health System CIO, and I'll be your moderator today. We're looking forward to your participation. You can send in your questions or comments at any time in the Q&A box, and we'll take those later in the program. Just so you see how we're going to spend our time today, first we're going to go about 35 to 40 minutes with our main panel discussion featuring Guido Romero, VP and Associate CIO with WVU Medicine, Pam Austin, former SVP and CIO with Ballad Health, and Dr. Guido Giunti, Chief Data Officer with St. James Hospital, Dublin. And then we will get to our audience Q&A. So let's jump right in. Pam, let's start with you. Can you tell me a little bit about your former organization and your role there?
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, Pam Austin. I spent over 30 years as a healthcare IT executive, and like you mentioned, most recently as a senior VP and CIO of a leading enterprise technology and digital transformation is what I was leading there, and it across a multi-hospital health system, and that's across multiple states. In that role, I was responsible for basically IT strategy. We implemented Epic at scale. There's cybersecurity, there's AI readiness, and road mapping, aligning technology investments with clinical and operational outcomes, documenting what that looks like from a metric standpoint. And at the latter part of my work there was focused on how organizations move from technology deployment, right, to genuine adoption, which is really what we're here to talk about and is the core of AI literacy.
Excellent, Pam. Thank you very much. Elo?
Hi, Anthony. Thank you for having me here. So a little bit about my organizations. We are a regional academic health system with 25 hospitals across West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Maryland. We have 39,000 employees, more than 4,000 physicians, and roughly 3,500 licensed beds. I have IT responsibility for our flagship hospital, Ruby Memorial, W Medicine Goalies and Children's Hospital, and our Uniontown Hospital in Pennsylvania. At the enterprise level, I lead analytics, interoperability, digital experience, and artificial intelligence. This is a department I built from the ground up about 6 years ago. I say this often, and I mean it, that I think I have one of the most fun jobs in healthcare IT, because I see my job as making healthcare smarter, smoother, and more connected.
Excellent. Thank you. Dr. Giunti?
So, hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. So I'm the Chief Data Officer at St. James Hospital in Dublin. So to give it a bit of a perspective, St. James Hospital is one of the largest academic health centers in Ireland. It's one of the major teaching centers that we are as partner with Trinity College Dublin. It's a hospital where we have approximately 6,000 staff, and we do all sorts of care, like from acute and complex care. And it's also one of the few hospitals in Ireland that have an electronic health record. We've been among the first ones to roll out an EPR already prior the pandemic time. And as you can imagine, with having data, it comes all of the added benefits and disadvantages of when you try to operationalize that data in terms of AI and creating an AI-aware organization. One of the main things for us is really interesting is that since we are in the European Union, we need to as well follow all of the different guidelines and rules from the European Union, such as the EU AI Act and also the European Health Data Spaces, as well as general data protections. There are things that we need to align as well.
All right, very good. So let's get into our discussion. I think a good place to start is to establish some kind of baseline of what we mean when we talk about AI literacy. What are we looking to achieve in terms of the knowledge level of the workforce? So let's sort of go from there. What do we mean when we're talking about AI literacy? Ilo, let's start with you.
All right. So I see AI literacy more a capability, not a curriculum, and it's much more than teaching people how to use a tool or how to write a prompt. Of course, prompt engineering has a part of it in certain areas because the quality of what you get depends on it. But I really think about AI literacy in let's say five different dimensions. It starts with culture. It starts with culture because it starts with fostering a culture where people feel comfortable being curious, experimenting, and asking whether there are better ways to do the work they're doing, better implementing different ways of completing their workflows. The second, I think, is giving people safe access, safe governed access to tools where they can actually try to practice on approved tools. They can improve their skills without fear of doing something wrong. And because people cannot become competent with AI, with tools, if they can never use them. Then there are some very important pieces. The third dimension I see is giving your workforce a basic understanding of what AI can do and what AI cannot do. So you need to know what is okay to delegate to AI or what you can take out of AI and what not to. We have then part of the next to this is really once you adopt and start using AI is critical evaluation. I see this the responsible use AI, the accountability, teaching the critical evaluation, because AI can generate, confident, plausible, sometimes wrong information. And I think it's very important to impress that in people. And in a literacy session, a way we use this is, I think, a very important piece is you can make it almost a joke. You can show a harmless hallucination about an executive or a physician champion. Of course, ask permission before you do that. But then that humor that comes out of that example you give will be memorable. People will remember that and then will connect it to the verification behavior that you expect. And then really it's that responsible use and accountability, which means there are guardrails that we can put, there are rules that we can put for which organization is responsible. But at the end of the day, we also try to register with people using AI that if you adopt anything out of AI and your name is on it, you own it as if you wrote it yourself. I think this is the baseline that defines, I think, in our organization, how we look at AI literacy. Of course, from there, the depth that you get with the different groups or the different roles can change.
All right, very good. Pam, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, the mistake I see is treating AI literacy as a single definition, sort of a one-size-fits-all across your enterprise. For example, a nurse using ambient documentation needs to understand something very different, right, than a revenue cycle analyst who's reviewing AI on a denial prediction. Literacy really has to be role specific, like he mentioned, and use case anchored. So the user is basically asking, what does this tool do in my workflow? What should I trust it to do, right? Where does my judgment still lead? And then those questions that define literacy at the point of care, right? Not a general understanding of how machine learning works, but in real life use cases at the bedside. And basically, AI literacy overall is just the ability to use an AI tool appropriately, and including those end users who are actually going to use the tool so they understand what it is doing in their workflow and where their judgment still and accountability still lies.
So a quick follow-up there, Pam, and then we'll go to you, Dr. Giunti. If it, that makes a lot of sense what you said. It's very use case specific, very role specific. Um, what's the role then for enterprise IT in that kind of an environment? Is it to encourage that this training and education be done at the more unit level? Because if it is so role specific, what's the role for enterprise IT in making sure this happens?
Yeah, I think it's based on what each person's job is, right? So you can do an overall, here are 10 definitions of what machine learning AI look like, but here is what it specifically looks like in your job. You could even build that into a job description, right? But from an IT perspective, that those users have to have a general understanding of all of it, right? If they're an Epic analyst, they need to understand how AI is working in that Epic workflow so they can help the user who's actually going to use that product understand what it's doing, why it's doing it, and help them in the adoption of the technology.
All right, very good. Dr. Giunti, what do you think about what you're hearing?
No, I mean, I agree in general. I think that the way that I would approach definition-wise, I would look at it as more of like demystifying what AI is. It's basically, I think that we have this tendency of creating these labels and try to rope in so much meaning into them, and then we tend to forget about what's behind it. So one of the things that I always try to do whenever we're working on AI literacy programs within our organization is to try to, instead of making it so that don't pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, we actually want to pull the curtain back a little bit and show you that there is actually a man behind and show you what's going on there. In the same way that you would expect that if I'm giving you a scalpel for you to conduct surgery, you should know what's the right tool for using for the specific place. The idea would be that we would want you to know the same kind of process for what is the enterprise tool that we need to apply, what is the use case that you're applying for yourself. Because while, for example, Copilot may be great, it's probably not the tool that you would want to go for if you're asking a medical related questions. You should have your approved set of tools specific for those use cases. So a lot of the ways that we are approaching it in our organization have to do with this kind of scenario-based and use-case approach, so that you would have an approved tool that you would use, and anything that falls outside of those cases for those tools, it is essentially the same as if you were using a non-approved tool. Because the fact that we have approved the Copilot or ChatGPT or anything like that for drafting your letters doesn't mean that you should be using that one for drafting a patient letter. So it's trying to create the scenario that fits the specific role, I would say.
What do you think, Dr. Giunti, about this concept of, and I want to make sure I'm not putting words into anyone's mouth here. Are we thinking that there's sort of a multi-layer approach here where enterprise IT is carrying out a certain type of awareness campaign at a higher general level, and then at the operations unit level, there's a different, more detailed, more use case and role-specific education approach? So we're hitting it from both levels?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think that the way to consider this is that you need to have your broad use AI. That is something that you want to make sure that everyone in your organization is going to be upskilled and qualified and understand to a certain extent so they can use it. And that should be your enterprise wide. And then you're going to have your more specific use cases that you want to reinforce, similar to what Pam was mentioning. If you have a nurse that is working in the wards, that will require a more tailored, specific role-based training program, as opposed to one of my data analysts who maybe wouldn't even know that we have an ambient scribe. But they don't need to know about that, but they need to know how it fits into the workflow. So I do think that you need to have it as a multi-layered approach, kind of like a pyramid of concepts that you want to build on.
Right, like ELO, like introductory course for everyone, and then based on your role, you take additional courses, nursing specific courses, revenue cycle courses, imaging courses. There's many areas where enterprise IT needs to support very specific workflows, use cases, and I've always been fascinated with how that's done and the sort of familiarization education process that enterprise IT leaders need to support a department properly. You need to learn about it, and they're so different. The needs are so different. So, does this sound right to you? This approach of a general education and then role specific and things like that?
Yes, and let me say something I find really interesting about it. So, of course, you have to start somewhere. So you start with the basics. You start with the foundations of what, like I was saying, what AI can do, what cannot do, what are the fundamentals, the things that you need to watch for. Once you have that base, the general education that you give to your workforce, uh, if it clicks, with the leaders, if it clicks with the staff that have seen that general education, you know that you deliver the right message when people start thinking about how can I apply this new tool to my work, to the things that I do every day, and how we can make it better. And so the magic that happens is when those leaders that saw that introductory session, or the staff that got introduced to some of the internal tools or the capabilities that we have built in some of our applications. When it clicks with them, they come to us. They will come to us and say, "Hey, we would like to have a deep dive into this workflow with your team to start getting to see if there are opportunities for us to improve how we do this workflow." And that's the best thing that can happen. Then that's when you know that you're not going through a fixed curriculum. You have tools. These things are moving very fast. They're evolving incredibly fast. But when I talk about AI literacy as a capability and not a curriculum, that's what I mean, is that people then develop that understanding of what AI can potentially do for them, and then they are going to look for ways to resolve some problems that they have today, or some areas where they are inefficient today, where they can get much better.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So, these tools, as you said, these tools can and should revolutionize most workflows, right? So, there's part of every workflow in the world. There's an element of that process that can be improved by AI. What we want is for our employees to understand the capabilities so that they can examine their own workflow and optimize it. One of the hardest things in the world is to get people to change when that change is being imposed upon them from outside, right? Nobody wants to be forced to change, but I do think that about every employee in the world that's been trained on a workflow has an idea of how to make that workflow better and would love to do it if they were the one saying, "Hey, you know what? I do this every day, but man, if we did it this way, it'd be so much better." People get mostly frustrated when that kind of a suggestion is shot down because they say, "Well, we've always done it this way, so just keep doing what you're doing." And that's very deflating. Well, we want our workforce to be knowledgeable and then empowered to improve. So that's part of what we're doing, right? We're trying to make that culture where that happens. Pam, your thoughts?
Yeah, when somebody experiences AI solving a problem that they deal with every single day. So if you're there at, say, IT is out rounding and we're working with clinicians and leaders and asking what their pain points are, and we solve something through AI, that naturally grows their understanding, our understanding in IT. And that experience really teaches them more than any classroom module could, right? So we're not going to do a computer-based learning. The role-based piece matters because the risk profile differs by role, right? So a clinician making a care decision needs to understand AI limitations differently than if you have someone that's scheduling a patient or a billing specialist that's reviewing an AI-generated summary. What I would say is you start with a role one use case, for example, prove the value in that. Work with the end user, show them how that works. Then let that success spread peer to peer, because it will spread faster and the trust will be there if their colleagues experience it and they share the communication. If it's a negative experience, it's going to go with just as fast and the adoption won't be there.
True. Dr. Giunti?
No, I think that this is very interesting discussion because, so for example, one of the ways that we have approached this in our organization is that we have created this, as part of the AI literacy program, what we have is this base level for compliance, which is essentially one of these self-paced courses that you do on your own. And we start from very simple things like, well, your phone is doing AI when you're selecting the next word that you're going to type in your autocorrect, and the same way that the algorithm is showing you what posts you like or what YouTube videos or what Instagram Reels or Netflix, like these kind of things. So we build the compliance aspect to create this foundation in this kind of self-paced approach. But then we sort of reinforce that by having a set of more tailored approach where we have what we call awareness sessions, which is kind of similar to going to the grand rounds, and we host sort of TED Talk style conversations about what is AI, what is the potential, and they're always more tailored into what that specific department would do. And as a side effect of that, or as a byproduct of that, we also have developed these AI clinics, which are more similar to what Pam was describing, where we work specifically with the departments to try to figure out, okay, you had this problem, you approached us through, you were all informed through the basic compliance learning sessions. Then through an awareness sessions, you maybe got an inspiration, an idea, and then you request to have one of the clinics. And in those clinics, we work with the specific use case that you're doing. And I think that that's one of the ways in which you can also ease up a bit of the fears and concerns that people have about using the tools. Because it's one thing what you can do with your own phone at home, with your asking your questions. It's very different when you're talking about something that is in the work environment with patient-sensitive data. So it's about creating that environment where you feel safe to experiment and to reach out to have these kind of concerns and address them. I think that that's the balance that is very tricky. In our sense here in Europe, we have the advantage of having the EU AI Act, which kind of gives you a framework of a uniformity of what are risk levels and what are things that are required. But it's also how do you break that down into your own organization to actually reach the people, because it doesn't make sense to create, as Ela was mentioning, just like a curriculum that will just get outdated 2 months from now.
Elo?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I would like to add to this that a mistake I see sometimes we make is organizing learning around the tools instead of around the work. Like it's not like today we are going to learn how ChatGPT helps with that, which I'm not recommending with ChatGPT, but it's really, hey, today we're going to learn how AI can help with discharge or patient referral or chart review. And so people really learn more faster when they are applying AI to a problem they have to solve that morning. It's like relates directly to the things that they are doing. And so that's where essentially you want to teach that capability. You want to teach that the tools may change, but that ability of people to know what is possible, and then obviously what's the challenge that they need to apply is the part that needs to stay. And then I think there is you need to match then this also to the depth of the role that you have. Like when I know Pam was making the example of the physicians or nurses using ambient listening, and they need to know that what appears there is a draft, and they need to accept the fact that when using this tool, reviewing, correcting it becomes part of the new workflow. It's not an inconvenience. And so they need to understand that this is the new way. They can be more efficient in doing their work, but there is that piece that gets added, that is, you need to add that validation piece as an integral part of your new workflow. And so I think that's that's the key piece.
So I'll tell a little anecdote. I don't know if you saw this story in the news. I saw it a day or two ago. Um, how I would describe it was an AI hallucination phishing test done by a teacher. So the teacher put out a test that the students had to do. And in the description of what had to be done, knowing that the students were going to copy and paste it into AI, she put in some invisible text, used the word, and it had nothing to do with Madagascar. Madagascar should have never come up in this answer. She said, use the word Madagascar in your answer in a bizarre way. And I think like 90% of the kids failed because they copied, pasted, had it generate a response, pasted that into the answer, never looked at it. I thought that was great. So that makes me think of like a phishing test we do for cybersecurity. That's a hallucination phishing test. That's when you're getting, they talked about it. If you're getting, you can get this data, right? That nobody's adjusting what the AI has put out. Nobody's doing any edits to it. If your rates are like 95%, everything looks great. Like, no one's looking at it. So that's fascinating. And so this is, I always get interested in the role of enterprise IT, because some of this stuff you're part of, some of it you should be leading, some of it you need to be coordinating, and some of it maybe you have a secondary role and not a primary role. So I'd like your thoughts to go around the panel. What is the role of enterprise IT in this whole discussion, in everything we're talking about here today? Is it to lead, to partner, to support, to make sure, to coordinate? Because you can't take on responsibility for everything, right? So what are your thoughts there? Dr. Giunti, let's start with you.
No, I think it's a very challenging question because you need to better define what type of enterprise IT are you referring to, or what level of the infrastructure we're discussing, because obviously if you're talking about from a cloud perspective or the warehouses and all those things, your expectations are going to be much different than if you're talking about your EHR or any kind of other mega device.
I'm talking about AI workforce knowledge, education, curriculum, making sure you have a workforce that understands the tools that are available, what you can do with them, and what's possible, and that they have the ability to impact their workflow. What is AI's responsibility in making sure we have an enterprise that gets in that direction?
Well, I would think that like my first reaction, I haven't thought about this question, even though it's very deep one. I think that the main thing that we would need to have as an expectation, and I wonder whether my co-panelists agree, is that the vendors themselves need to have some responsibility or accountability in the training process for this workforce. Because sometimes it's often that simply because a tool has already been procured and it's been deployed in your organization, later there's a new update that unlocks a new AI feature. Well, I did all of my onboarding on that tool without that feature. How do I now how to rework my training and my induction processes to account for that? So I do think that there needs to be some kind of partnership and collaboration into the rollout of those features, because sometimes you just become surprised that all of a sudden, oh, now I have an AI summary here button that no one told me about.
Very good point. Ilo?
I think AI literacy will be successful when everyone owns their piece. Of course, IT has to own the platforms, the architecture, the access, the integration, the login, technical monitoring, you name it. There are many roles that IT can be playing, whether you are maintaining those or you are managing a vendor that is doing that work for you. But in our organization, we have seen also that, for example, policy and education are a close collaboration between legal, HR, and IT. And actually, even marketing is an important partner in terms of the communication and the messages that get sent out. And I see also that of course, security will own the threats that will come from these solutions. HR will play a bigger role in terms of the development of the educational material and the workforce learning and even when it comes to recurring or acknowledgements or mandatory training, there will be a role that is played by every part. But I see an important role also in the clinical operational leaders, because they own the workflow, they own the validation, they own the adoption, and they own the outcomes. And so they also need to be part of essentially either driving that culture of adoption of tools that make their departments more effective and efficient, and they need to own the piece also of making sure that they're doing it in a responsible way. And then at the end, you have also the executive level. The executive level is where you're setting the vision and the culture, because I think a recurring theme since we started this conversation, culture plays also that important role where you need to have that workforce that feels empowered to actually use these tools and try them without fear.
Very good. Pam, is this an invalid concern of mine that I worry about? Some areas are clear responsibility. Cybersecurity is a CISO, boom, that's your job. No one's going to say, well, I didn't know who was in charge of cybersecurity. When it comes to, this is all new, when it comes to AI literacy, that we mentioned about every department has a role in this: legal, privacy, HR, marketing, IT, in making sure we have an empowered workforce. What's IT's role? Should they be leading these discussions? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think IT should. IT can't and they should not try to own AI literacy enterprise-wide. The reach is not there, neither is the trust, right, from an IT perspective. Clinical leadership and executive leadership owns adoption among clinicians. For example, the chief medical officer, chief nurse officer, if they're not actively championing what you've got in AI literacy in clinical settings, then IT can't come along. They can't compensate for that absence. Just like HR owns the workforce communication and change management, especially around the narrative around job displacement fears, IT provides the governance framework, the technical guardrails, infrastructure that make the adoption possible, just like what he was talking about with security, role-based access to different applications. And the practical answer really is who owns which part is whoever has the trust, right? So a clinician to clinician, CMO, CNO has to be involved. Operations has to be involved. IT will enable it, but operations and clinical leadership have to lead it. And I think the breakdown happens when IT tries to drive the adoption without the operational ownership. And I see that a lot. You end up with a well-designed product or program that no one shows up for.
That's great stuff there, Pam. Let's stick with that. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Giunti, please.
Sorry, just that because I think that we touched, both you, Anthony, and Pam, you touched a very interesting point, because I do think that one of the main challenges that we're seeing right now with AI it's a bit similar to the wave that we saw about 10 or 15 years ago with what we then called digital health. So in the sense that you would be having these kind of positions being created as head of digital health or chief data health, like chief digital, all of these things. And we are very much tempted right now to create these roles of like head of AI, as if it was just like a vertical. And the reality, as you, Anthony, were mentioning there, is that there's not going to be a single spoke of an organization that doesn't get touched by AI. You're going to have AI in your legal department, you're going to have AI in your finance department, you're going to have AI in all of these things. And the main challenge that we're facing right now is because we're having this reactive response to the phenomena that we're witnessing here. So you want to somehow box it into this AI department label, and then we can figure out whether it should be in the executive medical or in the HR, or whichever one, but we want to box it in there. But it is this challenge that it's going to be similar to saying, for the same reason why we stopped talking about digital health, simply because healthcare is now digital. We're gonna be very soon talking about how well AI is everywhere. So why are we talking about who owns AI? It's just going to be another line in all of our own different job descriptions. We maybe end up talking about AI governance or AI policies from those perspectives, but I do think that it would be a dangerous mistake to try to box it into one single department, because it's just going to be everywhere.
All right, good stuff there. Yeah, I was just making some notes. When we talk about IT's role, a few things that IT would be responsible for is, letting the users know of the existence of a technology solution. So, hey, there's this thing that exists out there that might help with the problem you have. It's part of the job of IT, right? To let people know what's possible, what's out there. So you surface the knowledge of it. You help with the selection. If the users are interested in picking a particular product among a suite of products, you help them understand the choices, some of the trade-offs and things like that. Then you would help for contracting it, the actual purchasing of it. You would deal with the implementation of it, the technical implementation, the integration of it, make sure it's stable and secure, but not using it per se, right? Use is different than all of that. And that's an operational issue. So theoretically, they're involved in the selection, and then use moves over to the operations side. So we've got it going for you, and education is part of use. So again, Pam, to your point, that's not IT owning use or education on the tool. We've done all the other stuff. Is that right, Pam?
That's right, and it's always operational ownership. If operations is not involved in any of your projects, and especially with AI where there's fear or lack of understanding, then it's not going to be adopted. It's not going to be received well, and then the project will fail.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything they want to jump in on that?
I want to give also the flip side of the coin,
Yeah.
where instead of worrying about IT should not be leading this, which I agree, I should not be driving. There are pieces that IT owns, but to me, very rewarding is the flip side of the coin, when there is the side of adoption, where the departments are coming to you and they're saying, hey, we identified this problem and now we need to look, we just acquired this hospital and this is a real example, and we have to go through these thousands and thousands of pay stub looking for certain pay codes because we're doing this auditing. And could you help us with that? They come to us and we are able to solve that problem in 2 hours, and then the satisfaction that we get when they say, oh, it's amazing. This would have taken us 6,000 hours. And this is a real example of something just happened. And that's the flip side, where actually the departments actually embrace the culture, understand the tools, understand the capabilities. They don't have the tool per se, but they know there is a capability, and they come to IT to enable that and enable Summit in this case ad hoc to solve a very specific problem. And so I think you have also both sides. If you're doing your AI literacy as that capability where it registers with people what AI can do and cannot do for them, then they will come to you. They will use these tools. They will become more efficient.
And I think that that's a really interesting point that you're saying there, Ilo, because I think that in a lot of cases, IT, we end up being in a lot of a much more dominant role than we should in these conversations due to a lack of education on our counterparts, on the stakeholders that we talk. And I think that it is a very, very, very common issue in healthcare that we are, as a clinician myself, former clinician myself, I think that there is a big gap in our education in terms of digital skills and technology literacy in general. In that sense, it makes sense that we would relegate the discussion or some of the topics of the discussion to the ones that we consider to be the experts into the IT. But I do think that there needs to be a bit more of an active role on our side as healthcare professionals to be valid stakeholders in that conversation. We in our hospital and the organization, since we have this academic partnership with Trinity College, we're also part of a European consortium called SUSA, which is specifically for developing programs for upskilling healthcare professionals. Because the reality is that it's going to be the clinicians and the healthcare professionals who are going to have the best ground understanding of what's going on in the ground. And we can act as the interpreters of the need and try to represent that. But I think that it's much more useful if we can have it at least as peers or equals in the conversation, because otherwise we're just making technical decisions that get deployed and then we need to suffer through the pain points of that deployment.
Excellent. All right, very good. So Pam, I want to run something by you. Ilo mentioned the dynamic of being responsive to customer requests for assistance, which is totally good, right? I mean, we love that. You want help, like come to us and that's what we're here for, to support you. Tell me if I'm wrong, but that sounded all good. There's another dynamic I want to run by you, which I hear sometimes, which is IT is asked to lead projects that may not really be appropriate because you're so good at running projects and you're just asked to run things, and maybe you say, yeah, we could run this, but we shouldn't run this because it shouldn't be an IT project, and maybe there's ways to deal with that. But what are your thoughts there, Pam, on both of those things?
Yeah, so let's talk about, imagine we're implementing Epic, for example, which we did that. You have to have an operational owner. IT does not work. IT doesn't use the product. They don't use the tool. We're there to keep it safe, secure, and available to the end user. How you use it and how you use it in the field to care for patients, all the way around, whether you're scheduling an appointment or whether you are with a patient, giving a diagnosis of something. The operational owners have to be involved. IT can lead the project all day long. The failure point comes when operations does not own it, they don't drive it, and they're not fully engaged in why the project is being implemented, why it's there, what it's there for, who mandated it. And if operations is not there at the table from the very beginning of whatever it is you're implementing, then the adoption starts waning and IT starts taking more of an active role, filling in the gaps. And IT should push back to the operational owners.
And I suppose you could have a situation where initial participation is there and starts to wane. Perhaps there's committees and meetings where key operations people are not coming as frequently as they should, and you see a pulling back. Have you ever seen this kind of a thing that had to be addressed and pulled back in, so to speak?
Oh, absolutely. Everybody comes day one to the kickoff. We're all excited. We're going to implement this wonderful project. 3 weeks later, everybody's gone back to their day-to-day business because they're too busy to work on that project. That has to come from the executive leadership, from the top down. You have to regroup if necessary as many times as you need to, and make that executive sponsor be the one saying, we are going to implement, and this is what we're doing, and have those regular touch points. Otherwise, it will be a project that just goes on and on and on, and finally just wanes away.
Dr. Giunti, thoughts on that kind of dynamic? Any kind of sort of dropping off of operational involvement should be concerning, right, to an IT executive?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's one of the key indicators that an initiative is going to fail if you don't get enough involvement from ops. That's ops and clinical lead are essential for everything. And I do agree with what Pam was saying, that sometimes in IT we get the management of this simply because it's so much more akin to our own different backgrounds or the practices that you would have, documentation, milestones, that kind of management that other roles doesn't need to happen. But I do think that it's just a matter of figuring out how can you collaborate more effectively here. But if you don't have the buy-in from ops, it's probably doomed.
Very good. Elo, any thoughts there?
I agree. Of course, any project that is IT-led is going to fail. We see this in many areas where sometimes even operations, some of the operational leaders want to push the responsibility to IT to own the project, but we know that's wrong, and so we try to push it back. We're there to support, we're there to enable, but then, the communication, the change management, the adoption, it needs to be led by the operations. So I completely agree. I leave it. We have a very large project where we have this exact problem right now, and we are trying not to own it. Like I say, this is not an IT project. We're here to, and so I cannot agree more. That's the case.
Well, what's fascinating here is that it's a problem that keeps happening. So there's a reason this keeps happening. There's a reason this is something that keeps creeping up. And even though we tried to prevent it and make sure it didn't happen, all of a sudden here we are, and IT is leading the project. So I guess it's something it's like scope creep or mission creep. You just have to be very vigilant to notice if that's starting to take place. And Pam, as you mentioned, maybe get an executive involved to sort of get everything back online.
Yeah, absolutely. Without that, then the project's never going to be implemented well, right? So the executive has to have the ownership. If they're not fully invested in it, just like my peers here have said, it's not going to work. It won't implement well.
Yeah, it makes me think of just that funny dynamic of.
Anthony, sometimes
please go ahead.
I tell my teams, just write the document, just give it, serve it on a plate, like they can edit, they can change it, they can do anything they want. We will do all the busy work in the back end and enable them to deliver.
Right.
I think what happens is they're too busy in operations, or they don't have enough time. There might be situations like this that are legitimate, right? And they rely on IT to do all the grunt work, if you like.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you need to push it back, even if you're doing all the work, even if you are providing all the information, even if you're facilitating. They need to lead it. They need to have that vision. They need to be the voice. And so we lead it.
I'm laughing because I'm picturing a simple test everyone can do at the next meeting of the project. You are not supposed to be leading. Just simply do this. Make sure you're not the first one to speak in the meeting. Just sit there. Because if if nobody talks until you talk, you're leading the meeting and you're leading the project. So just sit there and wait and say, well, it's not my meeting. I'm here to support. Anyway. Very amusing, although painful, I'm sure, at times. All right, let's do our Ask a Co-Panelist. Let's go with you first, Elo. Do you have a question for one or both of your co-panelists?
Let me think. I will say...
We can put you on hold if you want a minute. We can go with someone else first. All right, you ready?
I like that Guido, seems that you have a lot of like you have a level of maturity that, as I was listening to what you were saying in your literacy work, and so is there what is one thing you have stopped doing, or you will advise another system not to do because experience changes your view, on how you approach the AI literacy?
That's a great question. I think that the main lesson so far would be resist the urge to centralize things. It's a very common intention that you would want to create like a unique point where you would have the oversight for everything. And I think that that's because it's very natural. You want to be able to have like an ultimate authority and that would have this review and that would have this decision. But the reality is that you end up creating this very obvious bottlenecks for the workflow. So try to decide to have it by design as a distributed or federated approach, where you can have a centralized entity as the ultimate authority, but it's much more beneficial when you can have a distributed network that is operating, so that you would have, okay, I'm gonna have maybe a group of people working on how do I create the literacy program for the nurses, as opposed to I'm gonna create one for all medical professionals. Because if you do it like that, then you end up into these whole conversations of, well, is a physio the same as a consultant? Is a consultant the same as a surgeon? Like you have all of these things. So I think that resisting the urge for centralized and try to create by design a distributed or federated approach, it takes a lot longer because you want to get an alignment on all the ways of working before you go into that distribution, but you end up gaining a lot more time later into the implementation, into the rolling out, because we are first all aligned into something and then go and do it to what fits your department.
Thank you for
Excellent.
that. And Anthony, I have one for Pam as well.
Please.
So, Pam, you brought so a lot of different organizations together into one system at your former system, and I'm thinking when you're trying to build the same habits across groups that started in different places. What actually helped people get on the same page? And, I ask because most of us are trying to do that across departments, and you have done this a lot in your, with your experience. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the key to that is executive leadership sets the stage, sets the expectations, and creates the culture from day one, what the culture is going to be. And then you take, if it's a merger situation or whatever it is, you take leaders from both areas, and you just have them come together as one, where you don't see them as divided, and you just it's all in the adoption, it's all in the language you say, it's all in you have to practice what you preach kind of thing, and just continue to bring the leadership together all on the same page. And then the team members are going to notice that, and they'll adopt, and they'll come together just like the leadership is. But if it doesn't set the culture at the very beginning, from the executive leadership, from your CEO on down, then it'll stay divided. But the key is communication, constant communication, the culture, defining what the culture is, modeling what the culture is, and then expecting it from all the team members.
All right, we're almost out of time. I apologize. I don't think we're gonna have time for any more questions, but let's do a round of final thoughts. Your best piece of advice to someone trying to make sure that they're getting their team where they need to be from an AI point of view, so they can, leverage these tools and optimize their workflow. So, final piece of advice, and then we'll let everyone go. Ilo, let's start with you.
All right. So AI literacy is not about creating AI experts. is about a workforce that knows when to use AI and how to use it responsibly, and understands when to rely on the human judgment is necessary. I think this is the key takeaway, and essentially, really, the goal is understanding the limits of AI. It's understanding how to use it safely. But then when you get beyond the floor is then it's understanding also how to use it as a tool, like you use email, you use Excel, a tool that can help you, get better, and that's when it becomes fluency. And that's not something that will come with one-time class or with one curriculum. It's something that will come from culture, safe access, and that continuous learning and practice.
Excellent. Thank you. Dr. Giunti?
I think that if I could leave us a parting word here, I would frame it in terms of learn to recognize the need and learn to do something about that need, even if it's similar to what happens, when you go to the doctor and you have a concern that you're not sleeping well, and then in the middle of the consultation, the doctor discovers that you haven't been taking your diabetes medication, and all of a sudden the consultation turns into that. And then you go back home and you still are having trouble sleeping because the doctor didn't give you anything for that. So I think that we should be looking at this, the discussion about AI literacy and supplying the workforce with that same kind of a lens of managing the agendas. When someone in the staff, someone in the organization is coming to you because there's a need or they want to use a tool, what we need to do is make the effort to understand, okay, what is the need that the tool is trying to comply with, and then come up with a way of providing for that need, even if it is with perhaps a suboptimal approach. But that's how we develop the trust, because without the trust, we cannot go forward in any of these perspectives.
Excellent. Pam, we'll give you the last word.
Okay, and I'll sum it up like this. I would say AI literacy is a leadership responsibility, just like what we've talked about here. It's not an IT initiative. And the moment that the leaders own it visibly, the workforce is going to invest as well. And then AI doesn't replace judgment and compassion, right? It makes more room for it.
That's very well said, and that's very true. Excellent conversation. Well, that's about all we had time for today regarding continuing education. You could use the link that I sent out in the chat box. There are also links to other health system CIO resources. I want to thank our tremendous panel from around the world. We have some international representation today, so that was very nice for joining us today and spending their valuable time with us. And you for attending. And with that, everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.